Hello. Good to see you, Brian Lambert here. And thanks for joining the Brian Lambert Show, where we're going to talk today about what it means to be data driven. You may have heard of this concept. You may have had somebody say, hey, we need to be data driven. You actually may have heard people say, we don't want to be data driven because it takes away intuition or it takes away our gut instincts. And in the AI age, one of the things that's often overlooked, in my opinion, is the concept of data and how critical it is to success in AI. So, we're going to talk about that. We're going to tackle this challenging topic of being data driven. And thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions about what it means to be data driven or how to be data driven, or even questions about technologies, concepts, whatever, just chat it in the chat box and I'll be happy to answer. Let's dive into Tech Bits. Today, AI news. What I like to do every week is share a little bit about what's happened in the past week. First, we've got generative AI. Technologies are actually reporting an improved productivity lens. And this is important because AI itself is a productivity driver of human productivity. And so when you look at companies like Lumen Technologies, they've actually said that Copilot is saving salespeople 4 hours weekly. And that could be a $50 million savings. So what does it mean to save time? What does it mean to be more productive? AI is in that conversation. Also, AI and digital is becoming more democratized. AI tools are empowering non-IT people with trends with trends expected to increase. So what that means is no code builders or low code builders are actually becoming more prolific. You can actually use drag and drop interfaces and build tools or bots or even agents as a business person, which is going to actually accelerate ideas and creativity. You may have heard in the past week, the Trump administration announced the Stargate project, which is a $500 billion project to invest in AI infrastructure. So what does that mean? Well, it means data centers and hardware primarily. That's what infrastructure is in the AI age. And they're committed to that $500 billion over the next 4 years. Obviously, that creates a huge boom from a infrastructure perspective and new jobs being created. But it also creates more access to AI power and the concept of AI becoming more available. And what is AI? Well, it's data centers. It's a lot of memory. It's a lot of computing power, and it's access to help power applications. Organizations in the news are actually moving to what's considered small language models. You may have heard of large language models like OpenAI, Anthropic, etc. Small language models are actually being able to deploy on a phone. If you have the new Apple iPhone, small language models are imported there on the Apple iPhone, takes up less memory, and you get good answers. Do you get the best answers? No, but it's good enough for most routine and day-to-day tasks, and that's what small language models do. Takes up less memory, takes up less computing power, and still gives you close enough for everyday tasks. Autonomous agents are picking up. This is the year of the agent. We talked about that on the last show. Autonomous agents are picking up, and that means basically that agents can use generative AI to figure out what to do and to take action with other applications or tools. And that's what you're seeing here in the agent world, is that an agent can take action, drive a computer, make a reservation. It can interface with Instagram. It can interface with Grubhub. There are applications that AI agents can interface with and do things like setting up appointments in other applications. So you're starting to see AI really starting to become almost like a operating system to move and drive apps again on routine tasks that interact with and perhaps are tedious to the user. And then this all means that you need cloud computing, and most of the horsepower, if you will, the CPUs are in the cloud. Obviously, that's where the the compute power is. Excuse me. And when you look at the idea of providing that access to people, more and more organizations are indeed moving to the cloud to access that AI and machine learning compute power that many organizations like Meta, Amazon, and others, Azure, are providing in their platform models. So that means that cloud computing is also becoming the AI compute area for these models to be used by organizations. So that's what's happening in the news this week. And those things lead to an interesting conversation around data and the concept of AI governance. The more data is used, the more data needs to be ingested. More organizations are trying to focus more on real time access to certain mission critical loads. And also, that means that when you have that much data coming in, that fuels AI. You also need to govern that AI system to make sure that technology does not provide proprietary information, privacy information, personal information to people who don't need access or do not have those roles or rights and privileges. So you're starting to see a foundation around getting the data straight and getting data access, which we'll talk a little bit more here in the show. And then also governing AI, making sure AI has the guardrails to be successful. So what do you think about the tech bits from this week? Let me know. Chat it in the chat, and I am happy to respond to that chat. And let's continue through the process of thinking through the impact of these trends, the data and the information explosion and the infrastructure build that's happening or will happen, and think about it in terms of what is the big challenge with organizations using AI moving forward. And that big challenge, that digital dilemma that they'll have to overcome, is something that I call data drag. And in my new book, The AI Lead, I talk about data drag extensively. And we, as an organization and entities, need to overcome data drag in order to not only get value from data, but to fuel AI. And without data, without the access to the right data, artificial intelligence and machine learning and NLP, they can't be valuable. In fact, no data, no AI. So organizations are starting to realize that the promise of artificial intelligence is really predicated on their ability to get access to their data from the data silos that exist. That is a challenge. The data that's in legacy systems, that's a challenge to get access to. And then because data is such a specific area of need and specific skills are required, there's a bit of a talent shortage in fields like data engineering, data science, et cetera. And organizations are also at the same time moving beyond traditional database structures, such as relational databases, into unstructured data and databases in order to figure out relationships to develop a foundation for AI. And these concepts, again, I talk about extensively in the AI Lead, where I talk about not only the concepts, but the technologies and the tools required to overcome data drag. The biggest being the siloed nature of data and how data not only sits within large SaaS products, software as a service products, but it's also sitting in storage. Storage is cheap in the cloud. Many organizations are filling up storage because the cost is not as expensive as it once was. So organizations that have large amounts of data are sitting on a gold mine, so to speak. The challenge is what data is where, and what does AI need in order to be valuable in how it generates outputs. So that becomes a digital dilemma, especially when you think about how organizations need to drive success in the AI age where data is the foundation. So, how do you unlock solutions to this? How do you unlock data's potential? You may have heard data is the new oil. Data is the fossil fuel of the AI world and the AI age. I think it's important to understand that organizations are using generative AI, but that generative AI is really built on these large language models, and the large language models are built on what's publicly available and trained on the internet. Obviously, there's some nuance in each of these platform models, like OpenAI and Anthropic, but largely that those have been trained for years on publicly available information. Organizations are now realizing that their internal proprietary data is critically important, and there are new advances over the last year to bring that internally. And you may have heard of retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, to do that. And I talk about that in the book, The AI Lead, if you want more information on that. But the concept here is, if you have a large amount of data, you can unlock that data internally without exposing it to the model, without exposing it to the large language model. And that's a critical piece to ensure that your private data does not get exposed. What you're really doing is you're going to your primary source first, and then from there, in the backstage, if you will, the prompting is happening behind the scenes to ask very specific questions of the large language model. So, in that view, organizations that want to do enterprise AI, that want to bring AI internally, they have to have data, and they have to have access to it. And no data, no AI. And that becomes a challenge. So, how you overcome and unlock data's potential is you have to integrate data sources. These are internal to the organization. You have to also modernize your practices and build systems that handle not only batches of data, but move into more near real time or real time data. And then people across the enterprise need to be digitally literate, data mature. And that means that they need to understand what data they have, where it comes from, and they need to speak in the language of data. And that is what most organizations, most leaders mean by being data driven, data led, is the ability to understand what data, where it is, and how it can be useful to make decisions. AI helps with that, but only if AI has access to the data and the data is fresh and relevant. And this becomes the hidden barrier that holds organizations back, which is why data drag is such a dilemma. So when you look at the opportunity for that, let's kind of plot out here a simple approach. This may not look simple to you, but this is very, very overly simplified. And I like to bring up this type of perspective on the show, because what I'm trying to do is blend the business world, the business team view, with the IT team view. And in that middle where those meet, where the business teams need to work with IT, frameworks like this can help. And so on the left, you have just data coming in. And you may have heard of data engineers and data architects and data analysts. Well, they're at different points in that data, quote unquote, pipeline, the data flow. Data engineers are on the front end typically to make it all work. They do a lot with the data infrastructure, making sure that they understand the data sources and can bring it in. A data architect has a lot to do with structuring the data. They have a special language as well as the data engineers, but data architects are really understanding what are the fields, what is the data elements, what are the types, and how do we architect that and get so we can get access to it for the right use cases. There's a lot underneath all of this. There's a lot of technology. There's a lot of roles. There's a lot of focus. But the bottom line is, from an AI perspective, if you can't get access to the data with the data engineering lens, and you can't get access and actually figure out how to use the data from an architect lens, you cannot analyze the data from a data analyst lens. And you may have heard that old adage, garbage in, garbage out. Well, in the context of AI, it's not only garbage in and garbage out, it's garbage throughout. You have to stay and have high fidelity throughout in order to trust the process and what you give your AI. So that means from a data management perspective, end to end, you have to design the right type of ingestion process, get access to the right data. You have to secure that data. They call it, in most cases, data at rest and data in motion. It has to stay encrypted, right? Don't want bad actors to get access to it. You have to govern that from an architect perspective. And again, we're at the data level and all this, keeping it very, very, very simple. There's a lot of technology. There are a lot of decisions. I'm just trying to give you the business process that you have to govern this data from at the field level, so to speak. And then you can enrich those fields. And if you're in sales and marketing, you may have heard of data enrichment, where you enrich a profile or you enrich a company or an organization's definition, and et cetera. And that's what enrichment is. You can do that at a data level and clean it. You can clean data, you can enrich data. There are tools for that. And then from there, you end up with an opportunity. In the past, you would just say, okay, we have the data, let's run reports. Now what you're starting to see is that organizations take that data and they run machine learning models on it with a lot of algorithms. And machine learning is indeed the foundation of AI, one of the foundations of AI. So machine learning models are running, and that lets us observe and make ideally patterns, identify patterns. And that's where generative AI comes in, so that we can generate and automate. So in the book, I talk about the concept of, digitize a piece of paper, digitalize a process, and then automate that process. And that's where a lot of organizations are going through the process of internally to figure out what can you digitize, what can you digitalize, which is the process, and then what can you automate. The challenge is, and there was a piece of news that came out 2 weeks ago. Most manufacturers, 2/3 of them haven't necessarily digitized their work. That makes it very difficult, if you're not digitizing your work, to actually do AI, because again, no data, no AI. So even though we work in tech fields, we're highly technical with robots, et cetera, doesn't mean that you have the building blocks and the ingredients for AI, because your AI, you haven't digitized, which is simply, taking a piece of paper. I'm going to turn this physical piece of paper into some ones and zeros and digitize that. And I talk about this in the book. But then, okay, now we have that digitized. Now what do we do with it? Well, we can start digitalizing the process. And once you digitalize steps in the process, you can automate. Once you can automate, then you can use agents to help. And that's where you're seeing a lot on YouTube. You're seeing a lot of people talking about agents. I like to focus on the fact that you cannot get to agents unless you have the right data and the process defined. And that's going to get a lot of people frustrated, because they cannot recognize the value of AI. And that's because they haven't figured out how to mine their data. So that's the breakthrough blueprint there, is to think about the idea of data management from an end-to-end perspective and what that means. So to get there, well, that means we have to define the goals. What are we trying to achieve with AI? And again, no data, no AI. So what are we trying to achieve? And then where is the data? Where is that data coming from? And to a business person, it might be, well, we have that data. To a technical data engineer, it's, well, where specifically is it? How fresh do you want it to be? There are a lot of technical requirements that need to be understood in order to get that data aligned to business goals. From there, it becomes, once we have our goals defined, what are the challenges and the roadblocks? And this is one of the things that's really critical as you're deploying AI, is listening to the engineers, listening to the developers, listening to the business people. When you're encouraging this implementation of AI, also encourage, look, this doesn't work. this isn't what I was expecting. I think we have to be very, very transparent in the business and in IT, that there are barriers, and we got to figure out how to overcome those. Most of those barriers are in two areas: the data and the human element. Those are the two big reasons why digital transformations fail: is digital and human. And that the promise of AI is both. The opportunity is both digital and human. But if one or the other, it's your weakest link, so to speak, you're not going to get the value out of AI. From there, you can develop solutions and then implement and monitor. I like to focus on the fact that oftentimes the goals are not clear and also the challenges are not understood. So those are the how we break through this is to figure out how we're going to apply AI and then how we're going to be successful. So let's talk about then in the context of being data driven, how do we actually put this into practice? And we can use something such as customer feedback. Well, hey, from a business perspective, we might want to say, I would like to understand what our customers like and what they don't like. Let's make that happen. A maybe a forward-leaning business person might say, "Hey, don't we have the customer feedback? Can't we tell what customers like and don't like?" And if the answer to that is yes, to a business person, it's like, okay, well, let's use AI on that. Let's start creating more of what customers like and producing less of what they don't like. Right? What's so hard about that? From a technical perspective, customer feedback at a data level comes in many, many different forms, right? So, are we talking about the fields on the website? Are we talking about the fields in a chat box? Data is in fields. It's in types. It can be in records, such as JSON records. It could be in the idea of a stream. So, to a data engineer, there's a lot of different opportunities to think about quote unquote customer feedback. And to them, there's customer feedback in what happens on an online store, what happens in perhaps a customer frequently asked questions or customer facing content. There's customer feedback in whether they like a webinar or not. There's customer feedback in the idea of searching the web and landing on certain websites and taking action to download things. This is what's going on inside of the head of a data engineer that's aligned to the business. There's a lot of different options here for quote unquote customer feedback. So that gap between the concept of, hey, let's use and do more of what people want, has to get turned into some sort of view, whether it's through structured data or unstructured data, et cetera. And then we can do things with it. So that means now we have an opportunity to think through what are the inputs we need and then what are the outputs. And a lot of what I showed in the pipeline view is the idea that, input, output, garbage in, garbage out. When you start thinking about customer data, what are you hooking into and where is it coming from? Sure, we want to keep it simple, but we also want a good answer. Well, just arbitrarily narrowing down the input side is not necessarily going to give you the best answer. At the same time, only using ChatGPT will actually pull out and make your customer feedback irrelevant, because that customer feedback is not in ChatGPT. So on the other hand, sure, the simple, easy route is to just go ask ChatGPT what customers might want. But from a business perspective, none of your customer data should be in there, right? So this is the dilemma that you have to work through. And when you think about it in terms of how do we integrate and how do we pull together, it's on the input side, not on the output side. So on the input side, how do we integrate and connect the data? And so we can analyze it. Garbage in, garbage out, no data, no AI. That's the challenge. And that means you have to have a blend of business and IT perspectives to figure that out. And people need to be, patient. You got to be patient. You have to do the tedious, work. You got to go through that. You can't just jump and say, look, in 2 seconds, let's use these fields. If you do that and you build upon that knee-jerk reaction, rest assured you will have to rebuild it. Rest assured it will not work. You have to think through how to architect this out. And that's really the important piece here, is to think through how do we actually architect a system that provides the right inputs at the right time. More importantly, how do we feed AI or plug into AI the platform models that exist in order to have the best decisions possible? And that means we need to understand the role of a large language model, but more importantly, the role of our own proprietary data, and how do we get those things to be connected or leveraged or used without tripping over things like I talked about earlier: data privacy, data security, and AI ethics. And that's where a lot of work is being spent in a lot of companies that are investing in AI. They're trying to figure out how to make the data view work. It's less about, hey, gee whiz, I rolled out an agent. Let me show you how an agent works. Most of those agent examples that you're seeing on YouTube are not real business use cases. They are tinkering, and they're tinkering in the context of something detached from the organization. Yes, agents work. Yes, agents can do some cool stuff, but they're not being, showing examples of how these agents are being deployed inside of an organization for two reasons. One, if you are deploying agents inside of a bank, you're not going to want to share how that all works. It's proprietary. And plus, the second piece is, if you are deploying agents inside of a bank or an organization, the amount of work it took to get there is hard to explain in a 10-minute YouTube video. You just wouldn't do that, right? So I think we have to be clear on what the internet and the hype is showing versus what reality is. And we're going to have this gray area for a while where outside the organization, AI is rocking everybody's world, but internally, it's not getting traction because no data, no AI, no understanding of how data works, no understanding of the value we can create. Those two things are critical, and you have to have two key elements. One is data understanding and the data at our fingertips, and the other is the human element to understand what AI needs. What does AI require in order to generate good outputs? AI requires a lot less polish, a lot less whiz bang polish, and more about structured inputs that it can use. So, in the context of an AI, feeding it a bunch of videos, for example, the ROI on that might be less than perhaps feeding it structured inputs that you can move through faster and create those vectors with. So that's the challenge here, and the aha in all this is no data, no AI. And so what we did is we explored today on the show the concept of overcoming data drag and the concept of what it means to be data driven. What does it mean? What does it mean to be data driven? Well, data driven means understanding that you have a level of maturity that you have to go through as an individual. Usually, be data driven means you as an individual have data maturity, and you have to work on that. You have to be aware of where the data is. You have to understand how to use the data. You have to understand, more importantly, how to leverage the data for informed decisions. And then you have to think about, how could data actually lead me to make an action? So that these are individual elements of progress around data. At the same time, your organization has to go through an evolution. Your organization has to move away from thinking about data in terms of all the data silos and all the SaaS applications, and start moving into a shared view of data that customers would expect. For example, customers would not expect and appreciate all of their customer data in 27 different databases. They would wonder why why do you have my 27 different databases of me going? Well, they would like to have just one unified view and have it all work together. I'm sure you, as as somebody who's called into an organization, wish that they knew all about you instead of having to repeat yourself. The reason why we have to repeat ourselves is because the data collected by most organizations is in individual databases. It's in individual SaaS applications. It's organized. The data becomes organized like the org chart of your company. And, your company and how it's organized doesn't reflect the customer's reality. So when you organize data by your org chart, a lot of complexity there. in that reality. So that's the challenge that organizations have to go through, is to move away from having siloed data pools into more of a collective of data that represents how customers think. That's why you're seeing a lot more proliferation of the concept of data in the cloud, data as a product. You're seeing organizations build out a layer, if you will, a fabric. You may have heard of data lakes and data lake houses. These things are critical to serving AI the data that it needs. And again, no data, no AI. That's why it's critical to be data driven. It's why it's critical to understand how data works. It's why it's critical to understand that if you're in the enterprise and actually involved in any AI project, that you have to understand the data piece of that and follow data through. And that's the aha moment of what it means to really be data driven. So with that said, let me share an amazing thing that happened yesterday. We were in North Carolina, and we did a workshop around what it means to overcome data drag. And we tackled that from the perspective of security, from engineering, from development, and from the actual lens of an investor to tackle data drag and build AI solutions. And all of that was built on the AI Lead book that went on sale.
Are you drowning in data
January.
yet starving for insights?
There has to be a better way.
Introducing the AI Lead, your guide to overcoming data drag and accelerating digital dominance. Discover how to eliminate inefficiencies, transform data into a competitive advantage, and achieve digital dominance with actionable AI strategies.
With the AI Lead, we're not just keeping up, we're leading the charge.
Industry leaders call it a must-read for future-ready executives. Master change, lead with command. Visit AILeadbook.com and unlock the blueprint to digital success today.
So get a copy of the book anywhere books are sold. You can also go to AILeadbook.com. Very, very proud of the fact that it's won 4 international awards. It's also become a bestseller on Amazon. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. And that's it. Going to be a wrap for the Brian Lambert Show. Thanks for joining this week where we talked about being data driven. I hope the frameworks and the tools helped you. And I'll see you next week, every Friday at noon Eastern, for the Brian Lambert Show. All right. Take care.